You know, if Christianity wasn't true, so many people wouldn't be out here trying to attack it. That is one of the very common cop-outs that I get from Christians concerning why there are so many people, and mostly only in their sphere of influence that they pay attention to, that is going against, walking away, breaking down, debunking Christianity. And usually I ignore this. But then I thought about it. I thought about it yesterday. And I said, why are there so many people now debunking Christianity with such fervor? I being one of them. And so that makes you think about the entire history of Christianity. And for me, it goes beyond history, it goes into the culture as well. So when you think about the history and the culture of Christianity and the history and culture of religion in general, especially in the Levant, you had a very unique situation that allowed for Christianity to grow and become what it became, and now for people to walk away from it. Let me break it down to you in a very short period of time. Please just stay with me. So when you research or think about religion back prior to Christianity, so for the Roman days prior to first century BCE, first century CE, right? Pretty much everybody worshiped their own God and did not care if you worshiped a different God. Meaning that most people worship a deity or a pantheon of deities and could interchange their deities. So for instance, if I was worshiping Eshu, but then a friend of mine told me about Shango, I could worship Eshu and Shango. But if a friend of mine told me about Ra, I don't have to worship Ra, and they would be fine with that. Worship was really more personal, family oriented, or community oriented. The Jewish people were the only ones who said that, well, we worship this God. Our God is the right God, but we don't really care if anybody else worships our God. So they still, even though they had the our God is the right God, our God is the only God by the time we get to first century, they didn't care if other people didn't worship it. So if you was a neighbor to a Jewish person and you said that, well, I worship Apollo, and they were like, okay, go do your Apollo thing. Well, now I'm worshiping Apollo and Zeus. Okay, go do your Apollo and Zeus thing. So they didn't really care. But then along comes Christianity. And Christianity comes along, and Christianity takes on the idea of the Jewish tradition of, hey, there is only one true God. But unlike the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition said there is only one true God, and if you do not believe in this one true God, then you're going to hell. So I cannot be okay with you worshiping Odamare. I cannot be okay with you worshiping any other deity other than the God that I believe in. We're the only one perfect in our ways. And you must worship our God or you suffer some type of torment. You see, the Jews prior to that really didn't have a hell. It was just everybody goes into Sheol, and then some goes into annihilation, the other goes up to be with this God, Abraham's bosom. But for everybody else, it was like whatever. They didn't care because they believed that their God was just for them. This is henotheism. Now, the Christians, though, they were walking around first century, second century, third century. And although they had this mentality, people just like, you arrogant bastards. As though they treated them as arrogant bastards. Now, Christianity also was evangelizing, and most other religions didn't. But when they did, they evangelized and said, oh, hey, here's God, here's Shango. I know you worship Eshu, but here's Shango, and you can worship both Shango and Eshu. But when Jesus' teachers came around, when the evangelizing Christian went around, it was like, no, you have to worship this God. So if you was worshiping Serapis before, you can't worship Serapis anymore. You could only worship our God. So they eliminated people's ability to be able to choose who they desired to worship by if you converted over, and that was fine. And their numbers remained relatively small as time was in each era. And most people didn't like them. It was like that neighbor in the neighborhood that you don't like, but you have to invite them to the neighborhood block party anyway. And when they get there, you make sure that there's no more seating and try to make it uncomfortable for them. In this sense, they persecute the shit out of them, but they didn't really like Christians. Now, it wasn't until Christians started serving in the military in the fourth century, start serving under Maxentius, start serving under Constantine, that Christianity then became legal. Now, once Christianity became legal, Christianity then, around 381, became the only religion for the Roman Empire. And you have to understand, the Roman Empire conquered the entire Levant, plus into Asia, what we call the Middle East, all up into that area, down through all through Egypt. They conquered, they owned a lot of territory. So you forced a major group of people into Christianity. Now Christianity is different. See, prior to that, in the first, second, third century, and a little bit of the fourth century, you could argue against Christianity and no one would come and kill you. Prior to that, Christians argued amongst themselves, but no one came to kill you. But now that Christianity is sponsored by the state and has the power of the military, and then later on still has the power of the papacy with the power of the state and the military, now if you question Christianity, you will be murder, death, killed. You will be MDK'd. So Christianity spread like wildfire because it had the control of the threat of death by the military of the governing countries, the kings, the pope. So now, from about 400 BC, 400 CE, up until around the 1700s, you were forced into Christianity by threat of death. After that, after the 1700s, you still had some threats, but now the threat was coming from the community. The community was now threatening you. Hey, you look like a witch. Throw her in the water, and if she comes back up, she's a witch, and we'll kill her. If she doesn't come back up, then she wasn't a witch. Yeah. So you had the community. And then later, as we move into the 18th and 19th century, the 20th century, it becomes more of you get ostracized if you choose to worship something different. But now, Christianity doesn't have the support of the government to where it's enforced on people, and you could get MDK'd if you were to worship something other than this deity or criticize Christianity. Now, communities may scoff at you, Christian communities, but they can't do anything that takes away from your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So therefore, the reason why people are able, and you see so many people debunking Christianity nowadays, is because whereas in the beginning people had freedom to do so, and they did, this is why Christianity was in such shambles. But once the military took over, people couldn't. But now the military is not forcing you. The government is not going to come and kill you. You're not going to be ostracized from the world that you know of. So therefore, Christianity can be debunked because people have freedom. People have freedom that they did not have in the past. So that is why people are walking away from this religion, because you had no choice. But now we have choice. And when we have choice, we use our brain. We do critical thinking. And in the reading of this book and the critical thinking of its history and its culture, we recognize that this book is easy to debunk, easily a fairy tale, easily man created, easily devised to control people. And it's not in any shape or form a one true God or the right way. And there is no hell. So there is no threat of hell. So why do people attack Christianity? It has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not it's true. People attack Christianity because it's false, and we have the freedom to do so without threat. Yeah, you might lose some friends, you might lose some families, and in rare occasions you might lose your job. But for the most part, we're free to do so. And y'all don't like us having that freedom. But hey, always remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.